I'll say something in a song or in an idea, an early draft of a song, and I'll just think, this doesn't sound right to me. These aren't the words that I wanted to use to say it, or this isn't the melody that I wanted to use to say it. And so in those moments, what I've taught myself is it's okay to write a bad song.
Flint-based singer-songwriter Fernando Silverio Solis talks to us today about the discipline and work that goes into songwriting, and comments about the effort and intentionality of creating songs that have a personal yet universal element. Fernando will be playing at the Saginaw Art Museum as part of the Museum Tunes concert series on August 10, 2022. More information about the show can be found at saginawArtMuseum.org. Well, Fernando, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Really excited to have your show coming to the Saginaw Art Museum.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure's all mine.
So I want to jump in, and your music has these sort of soulful elements to it in a way. Like it's a very personal kind of music. And I'm curious, what comes first, the music or the lyric? Or is that something that happens together? I'd love for you to describe a little bit about the songwriting that you're doing and how that comes about for you.
Oh, sure. It's a little bit of both. I spend I spend enough time by myself that sometimes a melody will come to mind, and I'll use my cell phone and make a quick voice note, and I'll revisit it later and try to find the right key for it. Other times I'll just be sitting around with my guitar, because I make it a habit to always sit down to write. Even if I don't have anything in my mind that I feel I need to get out, it's just like an exercise, like a muscle. You kind of use it or lose it sort of thing, right? So it's a little bit of both, but I don't always know what I'm going to write about until I sit down to put the pieces together, whether it's the voice note that I mentioned before, or I'm just noodling on a guitar, and ideas will start coming out, and it just kind of, it'll start off with a couple lines like, oh, I didn't realize that I wanted to say this, and then I'll start kind of rewriting it, coming up with different drafts of it, and eventually I'll hit a point to where it just starts flowing, and I'll get into the mood of it, and it kind of goes from there. It's kind of vague, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that a lot of the writing that you do comes from personal experiences or from observations that you've made of others? Tell me a little bit about that root level, I guess, inspiration that sort of starts to trigger those muscles that you're exercising.
When I was younger and I first got into songwriting, a lot of it was personal. When I was younger, I think I would always try to use these abstract ideas and kind of like burying the message in metaphors, similes and metaphors and imagery. And as I got older, I started to feel more comfortable with who I am, and I kind of started to realize that everyone's a little weird, and that's what I appreciate as a listener, at least, of songwriting. That's what I appreciate the most, is something that's a little bit more straightforward that I can relate to. And it might be a type of feeling or a type of scene or an activity, something like a car ride or a song that gets stuck in your head, or the way that someone might say a certain phrase. Like we've all heard things like "I love you" or "I miss you" or I'm so upset, or I'm so happy to see you. And the different ways that people can say those types of things are so familiar, and those are such common themes that it doesn't matter what the language you put it in. It's what brings us together. So with songwriting now, at my current age, I try to not put myself in it so much, and more so of these observations that I can find myself in at times, but I don't ever want to put myself so far into something that maybe it's unrelatable in a way, because for me, that's how I've connected with people, is through music. As a young person going to shows, that's how I made my friends. And then as a performer and as a writer, that's how I felt like I was a part of a community. So I think it's just a sense of finding a universal feeling of belonging. And that's what I strive for when I write songs, I guess. That took me a long time to get there. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. You mentioned this sort of universality to your songwriting, and it certainly comes through where there seems to be these elements that you can really sort of latch onto. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and maybe give an example of how you use a phrase in one of your songs that other people can attach to and sort of think, well, yeah, he's saying it the way that I want to say it, but I can't say it that way.
Yeah. Wow, that's I don't know if I could ever give myself so much credit to say that maybe someone else couldn't say it that way. That if that does make someone feel that way, that's a huge compliment towards me. So that's awesome. But a lot of times I think it's a form of therapy for me, right? So like, for example, there's a song that I put out in 2019 called Wake Up Slow. And the song has a lot to do with questioning your roots and where they're truly planted. So for some of us, it's a hometown, and for some of us, it's a state of being, like a frame of mind, wherever they may go. And the opening lines, are wake up slow, sun don't sleep, everyone's dying to hold on to their dreams. And in those three lines, I think that they're direct in a way that, what it's like to wake up, like, let's say on like a Sunday morning, or like it's your day off. Let's say it's even that. It's supposed to be your day off, but you can't help but wake up at the time that your body makes you wake up. The sun doesn't sleep, so you rise with it, and you kind of jar yourself out of this slumber, shake off the dust. And for those few moments where you don't know where you're at, but you do know where you're at because you're in your bed, but are you really where you want to be? And then you get to the grind, and it's your day off, but maybe you're going to go intern somewhere, or you're going to sit down and write that book, or you're going to go spend some time with that person that maybe you need to work on that relationship with, as a family member, or whether it's a partner or an old friend. And you're going to put in, that time for your dream, whatever that dream might be, And so it's vague enough that it can mean so many things. But for me, I just kind of felt like, well, what are these ways that what are these motions that we all kind of go through, that doesn't matter what it is, you kind of have to take those few steps, right, that we can all relate to. Like we all put our pants on one leg at a time kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've had other guests on the podcast who describe this pattern of work associated with the creative process, and I hear that in what you've described as well. Do you find that have established enough routines where you're able to approach your songwriting as work without it becoming a drudgery, or is there times where it does feel like drudgery and you just sort of have to pile through?
I think the answer could be yes. Could be yes. And the reason I say that is there are moments where it feels terrible. It feels awful. And it's not because I don't enjoy writing music or writing songs, writing lyrics or ideas down. It might be just because there's a lack of confidence in the moment. And just like, it's not something that I've experienced just with songwriting. I've experienced it with, like, you know, day jobs I've had, or maybe just personal growth. And really the biggest thing is a lack in confidence and the ability to get to the process. So I guess in terms of songwriting, that drudgery, or to where this ho-hum feeling comes when maybe you're not most proud of yourself yet, or you haven't gotten to that point. You know, it's kind of like when you're working on a sport, or you're working on, you know, maybe you have a day job and you have to kind of hit a certain quota of something or other. I don't know. And you feel a little bit lousy for a little while, even if you're new sometimes. It's kind of like, oh, God, am I ever going to get this, you know? And I go through moments like that with songwriting, too, to where, you know, sometimes it will just come out. You get a couple of droplets, and then, you know, here comes the flood kind of thing. But then there's other times where I'll say something in a song or in an idea, an early draft of a song, and I'll just think, this doesn't sound right to me. These aren't the words that I wanted to use to say it, or this isn't the melody that I wanted to fit. And so in those moments, what I've taught myself is it's okay to write a bad song. It's okay to write something that you don't think is good. And it's for some people that I've talked to, like I have peers that I've had this kind of discussion with. And, you know, for some of them, they've said, well, what might be a bad song to you could be a good song to someone else. So, you know, it's okay to work through that process. But, you know, I think for me, it's a matter of you're not always going to write great stuff. You know, not everything that comes out, not everything that no one's perfect, you know, and everyone can find a flaw in something. You know, we're all very complex creatures and have different tastes and perspective on things. And right when we think we know something to a T, something changes, or we get new information on it, or whatever it could be. And I feel that the same goes with songwriting. So I push myself to say, you know what, this song isn't going to be that good, but I'm going to I have a verse, I have a chorus. I'm going to see if I can maybe make the bridge interesting. And then how do I want to end the song? Is there another verse? Is there another chorus? And I'll just put it together. I'll just put together this awkward, this like Frankenstein of a song to where you're not sure if the pieces fit. It's moving kind of funny. It might even, you know, look a little scary. and then you're able to kind of stand back from it and get a good look at it and get a good listen. And maybe it's a lot better than you thought. Or maybe you can see the parts that just needed a little bit of improvement, or maybe you need to build up a section here or there, and you can make something great out of it. Or maybe it's just an exercise in a genre that you didn't know you had the itch to write in. And all of these things they become fun where you don't have the confidence to get to the end of it. Or I'm speaking in regards to myself, I guess. I don't have the confidence to get to the end of it sometimes. And that's where it feels like, oh no. And then I say, it's okay. It's okay if it's not good. Just get to the end of it, because who knows, you might like it. And there have been times where I've gotten through that, and then I'll take the song to record it, and I'll work with you know, my friend Nick, who has acted as the producer on the songs that I've released. And I'll say, I've told him, I'm not really quite sure about the song, but I figure let's try it out. We got the studio time, so let's just see what we can do with it, and it'll become like our favorite song out of the session. So you never really know, and you know, lastly, I guess the last thing that I want to say about that is I found that it's so important for me, at least, to finish the song, even if I don't think it's a good song, because if I don't finish that song and see it to its end, I'll just keep rewriting it, because I wouldn't have gotten it out of my system. So as opposed to writing maybe, you know, 10 half-written bad parts, I'll just write one bad song, and I'll say, all right, well, there it is. That's on to the next one, and we'll see if that one's any better. You know, so yeah, I think I kind of kind of gets to where I'm going with it.
Yeah. Well, that's really an interesting perspective in terms of the need to finish in order to move on. You know, like close the chapter. My kids are fairly avid readers, and they tend to obviously gravitate towards books that they really like. And every now and then I'm like, how about you read a book that you don't like? You know, just so that you know what a book that you don't like is like.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, I had a wise mentor tell me, you know, you don't have to like everything you read. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to like everything I read. It's okay. But
yeah, no, that's a good point. You don't have to like everything you read.
Yeah.
Because you know what? You might have to read something that you didn't like, but you know, like whether it's for a class or a job, and then you kind of teach yourself to get through it, and you never know what you'll get from it. So
yeah. You've had a bit of music that you've put out now, and sort of keeping with this theme. You know, there's this writing for yourself and the possibility of writing for others. Do you ever feel sort of a tug between those two elements where, you know, you're working on a song and the influence of others sort of creeps in the sense of, you know, and you described it a little bit in terms of are people going to like this and what are other people going to think? You know, do you ever get a sense of that tension between deciding a song is written for yourself versus written for other people, sort of writing to your audience, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that the only way that I've been able to really figure that out is by testing it out live. And there are songs that I've finished and we'll be releasing or we'll be planning to record soon, that I played live versions of them and have ended up drastically different or will be drastically different from the first version of them. I do think that there's an element. I think there's two ways to go about it, right? And I think that part of you wants to write what you want to write as an artist, and I think that you should allow yourself that freedom. I think that we should, as writers, allow ourselves that freedom to write for ourselves. But as we approach the end of, as we're working on it, it doesn't have to be approaching the end of it, but somewhere within that body of work, I think a decision has to be made of, like you said, you know, who are you writing it for? And I'll often think, how will this go over in a live setting? You know, so sometimes in those situations to where, you know, am I writing for myself? Am I writing for someone else? You know, I let both of those things happen. You know, a song that I write might go over really well in a live setting, but maybe another song that I write will be better suited for in the middle of an album, of an EP, in a playlist, you know, to where, hey, this might not make sense in a live show because maybe it has low energy, or maybe it relies a little bit more on, you know, whatever type of, what dynamics have gone into the recording, you know. And I guess in those instances, maybe that would be better suited for that type of situation. And the only other thing that I think I could say about that is, you know, you had mentioned influence from, you know, other artists or outside influence, I guess you could say. And I think it's okay to let those creep in, you know. So let's say, for example, you're writing a song, right now I've been fortunate enough that I've had friends that have signed on to be like a backing band for me. And they're like, yeah, we're down to do this thing. We can do live shows. And there's some songs that I began writing that I'm writing for them, because now I'm kind of getting used to their playing style. I understand their dynamics as they work as musicians who are like kind of bouncing ideas off of each other, the way that a bassist and a drummer will kind of, lock in together, or the way that maybe an electric guitar can both lead the song or lead the melody, in a section of music, but they can also, accent as well. It doesn't have to be at the forefront. And so in those instances, I might, I've begun working on songs now that I think this is for these guys to play to, because this is going to be really cool once I present it to them and they dig in the way that they do. So I'm sorry, I think I get a little lost there, but I think, yes, both are so important, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think that if you feel pulled in a certain direction to write something for someone else, whether it's for the listener or the audience, or whether it's for fellow musician, I think that's a good thing, and you should lean into it. And then I also think that if you feel like you need to write a song that's for yourself, lean into that as well. And then at that point, the only decision that you need to make, I think, or that I try to decide at that point is, will this song be something that I release or not? If it's written just for myself, does this song need to be heard by other people, or is it something that, like, I like this and I'm glad I wrote it, but I think I'm going to keep it just for me to play at home,
Mm-hmm.
And all of it's worthwhile.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. I appreciate you sharing some of your perspective on that. Sort of in closing here, I'd love to hear more about some of the aspirations that you might have or hopes for the future of your songwriting or your music. How you feel you would like to continue in the way you've been going, or shift directions. Can you maybe describe for our listeners a little bit about what's in store for the future, if you have any concept of that?
I want to reach as many people as possible. And when I was younger, I used to think that it was because I wanted to be in a huge rock band, or I wanted to be able to sell a ton of records or be famous or something like that. And now my perspective in life has changed to a point that I don't look at anything anymore in regards to what can I get out of it. I always look at what kind of value can I bring to my environment, to the people that I'm around, or the people that I get to meet, or, where I'm living. Every place that I get to go feels like an opportunity and a gift. So I always just want to make sure that I'm adding value to it, leave things a little bit better than how you found it. So I'd never plan on stopping, I don't ever plan to stop writing songs. So my hope is that I can continue to provide value to people's lives in doing so.
Well, we appreciate your willingness to come to the Saginaw Art Museum. We'll look forward to hearing your music live, and really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. The pleasure is all mine. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to the Temple Arts Podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and making a donation to the arts through SaginawArtMuseum.org or TempleTheater.com. This will allow us to continue to bring enriching programming to Saginaw and beyond.